Heritage Society, you're all very welcome. It's great to see so many of you here tonight. It's a testament to Knockma and its importance it holds to individuals and the community as a whole. And we hope this evening to garner a better understanding of its importance in a much wider historical context. Many of you may already know our speaker tonight, Dr Jessica Cooke, or remember for a fantastic talk she gave us last year on Iar-Connacht. We were very excited to learn soon after that she had in fact been working on a paper about Knockma, and it was from this that we got together to apply for funding to do an aerial LiDAR survey of the hill. This basically involves getting a drone up in the air to scan the landscape and allow it to create a comprehensive 3D map of the hill and its archaeological features. We were incredibly thrilled then in May to be awarded funding for this project from the Heritage Council through the Heritage Community Grant Scheme 2024, for which we're extremely grateful. And we're delighted to have Jessica here tonight. This is the first of two events we're holding for the project. This evening, Jessica will present her paper, Knockma of Real Kings, a forgotten royal and ritual site in County Galway, which will follow up the other events during Heritage Week next month to showcase our findings from the survey. As well as Dr Cooke, we are very lucky to have Dr Paul Neesons from the Western Aerial Survey on board the project doing the drone work. We have already been out on the hill to conduct the survey, and we are now waiting the results so we can better understand this wonderful royal and ritual landscape setting right in our backyard. But now, I'd like you to warmly welcome Dr Jessica Cooke. Jessica gained her first degree at Trinity College, Dublin, before gaining a PhD at the University of Cambridge. She's a member of the Centre for Ancient, Medieval and Pre-Modern Studies at the University of Galway. Her research focuses on medieval Connacht, in particular the Kingdom of Iar-Connacht. While publishing academic journals in this field, she's also an active participant in community heritage projects, such as the Stone-Built Water Wells on Annaghdown project and the Medieval and Monastic Landscape of Annaghdown, both funded by the Heritage Council. So please, can you put your hands together for Dr. Jessica Cooke. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'd like to say thank you so much for coming out. It's a big crowd. Thank you for coming out to hear this. And also, I do want to say thank you so much to this Heritage Society for supporting this work and being so proactive. There's no way I could have done this on my own. I mean, Claire and myself and Tom, you know, plotting and planning, you know, what we're going to do and how we're going to apply to the Heritage Council, and you know, emailing all hours of the day and night, you know, what does this box mean? What am I supposed to fill into this box on their form? All of that we've done together, and you know, whatever comes of it in terms of the survey is as a result very much of your Heritage Society. So you should be really, really proud of it. It's great. It's really, really great. I'm here to talk today about my work on Knockma, on the archaeology and early history of Knockma. So, in a poem on the ancient kingdom of Ivannia, the 14th century poet Sean O'Donoghpatrick described the extent of this East County Galway territory in this way. The great third of the plain there, that is Ivannia, of the Great Assembly, is from Shannon of the fairy streams to Knockma of the Great Kingship. So, interestingly, O'Donoghpatrick names the western limit of the Kingdom of Ivannia as the Hill of Knockma in East County Galway, and he mysteriously attributed to it Great Kings, where the red dot is Knockma, and so that's the eastern edge of the kingdom, ancient kingdom of Ivannia, which stretches from the River Suck in the east right over to Knockma. Nowadays, Knockma is more usually described as the home of the fairies in Connacht, not as a territorial boundary with its own line of kings. Nonetheless, what I hope to do this evening is to give a sense of this ancient and beautiful landscape, explore ideas about the dynasty which lived there, and offer suggestions about the reason why this site and its kings fell out of history. So that's an aerial view. I will be suggesting that the Knockma landscape really belongs to a list of royal and ritual complexes in Ireland, whose most famous examples include Evan Macha of the Kings of Ulster in Armagh, Dunaghpatrick of the Kings of Leinster in County Kildare, Cashel of the Kings of Munster in Tipperary, the Hill of Uisneach in County Westmeath, Cruachan of the Kings of Connacht in County Roscommon, and Tara of the High Kings of Ireland in County Meath. These sites, always situated on high ground with panoramic views all around, have common characteristics such as the inauguration of kings, high-ranking burial, sacred or religious ceremony, and the assembly of people. In addition, there are smaller complexes of the same type, once belonging to the lesser kings in Ireland. I should add that this study is still at an early stage, and that because the records of this landscape are quite fragmented, I've been obliged to trawl a range of disciplines, including historical and literary texts, folklore, and archaeology, and very briefly touching on the newer disciplines of archaeoastronomy and genetics. So what does Knockma mean? It's most often translated as the Hill of Mead, though why it should be called so is a mystery. It consists of a limestone hill protruding 167 metres in height between the town of Tuam, about 9 kilometres to the northeast, and Headford, 11 kilometres to the west. Until the 13th century, Knockma marked the eastern boundary of the kingdom of Iar-Connacht, or what is translated as West Connacht. However, as the medieval Irish historian Francis J. Byrne pointed out, Iar-Connacht more accurately means the kingdom which is west of Connacht. And therefore, Knockma may have stood on the boundary with the kingdom of the Connachtha to the east. It is therefore possible that into the early medieval period, Knockma, rather than Cruachan, was the royal centre for Iar-Connacht. Only in the 13th century did the Normans drive the O'Flaherty rulers of Iar-Connacht across Lough Corrib, effectively displacing their kingdom westward to Connemara, from the western lakeshore to the Atlantic Ocean. Knockma is also known as Knockmada Siúl, or Shola, after Mór Shola, the plain it surmounts and dominates. This plain of Mór Shola, or the Barony of Clare, as it was later named, extends from Siúl in the north to Clare-Galway in the south, and from Lacha in the east, westward to Lough Corrib. However, Knockma is visible from a surprising distance, not only within Mór Shola, but also across South County Mayo and into Connemara, across Lough Corrib. This is actually a picture of you can see Knockma in the distance there, taken in Annaghdown, in my backyard. It's a bit of a compulsion to constantly be looking for Knockma. Within this general radius, then, Knockma can be seen to stand as a geographical centre point and visual lodestone, constantly drawing the viewer's gaze. It is therefore unsurprising that this landmark was used throughout prehistory and into the early Middle Ages as a prestigious ceremonial site, with many of the hallmarks of a hill fort. The sheer concentration of monuments around Knockma suggests that in the Neolithic period, from about 4000 to 2500 BCE, and especially in the Bronze Age, from about 2500 to 500 BCE, this part of East County Galway was well populated. Though the northern slope of Knockma has been obscured by forestry since at least the early 19th century, sizable stretches of earthen bank are detectable among the trees. These earthen banks may have been created when the hill was part of the Castlehacket estate, but for what purpose it is difficult to imagine. They may instead be the traces of divisions and structures which were once part of the prehistoric ceremonial landscape. You can see there, for instance, under the trees, these huge banks and ditches, which appear to have no function in their modern context. In a roughly west, northwest, east, southeast line, 4 cairns or stone burial mounds top the summit, one of which is undisturbed. This is Caherlistrane, named for Casa, the granddaughter of Noah, described in that curious meld of mythology and pseudo-history, the Book of Invasions, as having sailed to Ireland before the flood. So you can see there on the top, only the easternmost cairn is intact, that's Caherlistrane, but you can see the remains of 3 others as you go westward. So, Caherlistrane. This same structure is otherwise known as Maeve's Cairn, presumably named after Medb, Queen of Connacht. These cairns are in all likelihood Neolithic or early Bronze Age passage tombs, though they've never been investigated. Unfortunately, 2 of the cairns, known as Knight's Tower and Finvarra's Castle, were massively remodelled and given these names in the early 1800s by the Curwens of Castlehacket. These cairns appear to be the primary monuments towards which many of the later burials in the surrounding area, largely Bronze Age, are aligned. Tellingly, the townland that these principal cairns fall within is named Caltra, which means an old burial ground, possibly a pagan cemetery. Here's Caltra, here. Capping the flanking hills of Kildrum, Cave and Knockcarrageen are several more cairns, with many smaller burials clustered around them. Few of these burials are investigated. Those which have been tended to have been opened by accident before the profession of archaeology was fully established. In 1902, a secondary Bronze Age long kist was discovered dug into the cairn on Cave Hill. This long kist was found to contain a male burial with its head to the west, aligned towards Knockma summit, whether deliberately or otherwise, and 2 decorated vases were placed at either end of the skeleton. This is one of them. This is in the National Museum in Dublin. So more recently, technology in the service of archaeology has proven valuable. In 1987, Charles Byrne and Paul Gosling conducted aerial reconnaissance over Knockcarrageen Hill to the eastern flank of Knockma. Knockcarrageen was found to have its own hilltop enclosure, at least 1 cairn, a cashel, and several ring forts, all of which are part of the wider ceremonial landscape of Knockma. Concerning the cairn group on Knockma and the surrounding hills, Byrne and Gosling concluded that its clustered character and hilltop siting is very reminiscent of Neolithic passage tomb cemeteries, such as at Carramore in County Sligo, or the most famous passage tomb cemetery in the Boyne Valley, including Newgrange, Nath and Douth. Just as at these better-known complexes, no one cairn, ring fort or standing stone was constructed in isolation, but was always intended to be in dialogue, as it were, with the other monuments of the same ceremonial site and even with neighbouring ritual landscapes. In 1867, the antiquarian Sir William Wilde published a book on Loch Corrib, in which he recorded that from the summit of Knockma, the conical mountain of Donaghpatrick beside Westport in County Mayo, may be seen protruding up above the line of the Partry Mountains to the northwest. Draw a line there between Knockma down here and Patrick up there. It's at 90 degrees directly northwest. So long before the 5th century CE, when St. Patrick did battle with the demons of paganism on Croagh Patrick, this mountain, Croagh Patrick, was a prehistoric ritual site. And I spent most of last summer tramping from monument to monument about Knockma, and it is extraordinary how so many of these sites have been deliberately placed within view of Croagh Patrick, over 66 kilometres away. It is possible that this relationship between Knockma and Croagh Patrick has a further dimension to it, that of archaeoastronomy. Archaeoastronomy is the study of how prehistoric people understood and commemorated astronomical events, such as the winter solstice on the 21st of December, the shortest day of the year, the summer solstice on the 21st of June, the longest day, the equinoxes of the 22nd of March and September, when the days and nights are of equal length, and so on. To the early farmers of the Neolithic period onward, seasonal changes were of paramount, even sacred importance. Thus, the builders of Newgrange oriented their passage to capture the light at sunrise on the winter solstice, creeping up the passage, finally to illuminate the chamber at its centre. That's Newgrange. So, while no archaeoastronomical study has been made of Knockma, it appears that there might be a west-northwesterly alignment of its monuments, which might suggest that the ancient people here made ritual observance of the summer solstice sunset. This is a pair of standing stones in Ballinvoher townland, 10 kilometres northwest of the summit. They might align around the summer solstice sunset between Knockma to the east-southeast and Croagh Patrick on the far northwestern horizon. You can see one of the stones has fallen down, and you can see Knockma in between them in the distance. And directly back, that's the shadow of my head taking the photograph. Behind me, directly behind me, in the distance, you can see Croagh Patrick on the horizon. Another stone pair, and by the way, stone pairs are rare enough, and they tend to be, people don't know what their purpose is, but it's generally assumed that their purpose must be to do with sighting up the alignment, to do with lunar or solar cycles. So another stone pair, Moyne, early Christian monastery, just over the border into Mayo, also appears to align, this time directly west of Knockma, if it still stands, if the stone pair still stands in its original location. Because the graveyard was, it looks like in the 1950s or so, it was, the graveyard was upgraded, and one of the stones had fallen over. Now, the archaeologist Conmani was assured that the stone that fell over was simply put back up in exactly the same place. So, I don't see why you would put it somewhere else. So, if that stone pair stands in its original location, it does seem to align directly west of Knockma. This is not unusual. Elsewhere in the west of Ireland, alignment on the summer solstice sunset can also be seen at Cairngee, at Carrowkeel in County Sligo, and there are other such monuments. So, I am not an archaeoastronomer. My observations here are highly preliminary, but they would suggest that a thorough archaeoastronomical analysis of the monuments on Knockma is merited. So I mentioned that Knockma landscape shares many of the characteristics of the royal centres of Ireland. And foremost of these characteristics is the Uí, or assembly site, presided over by a king, described by Francis John Byrne as at once political assembly, market fair, with games and horse racing, funerary in origin, and held on the site of an ancient tribal cemetery. Sounds fun. This is a picture, there's a really useful website, Cambridge University website, of photographs taken in about the 1950s and 60s, aerial photographs taken in Ireland and in Britain. And you can see here, on a platform between Knockma and Donaghpatrick, and commanding spectacular views all around, including of Donaghpatrick, in a gap between the Partry Mountains on the northwestern horizon, is a monument known as Lishin Carna. This is a large enclosure, 77 metres in diameter, with an encircling bank and external fosse or ditch, and possibly east entrance. It's so big that it's actually difficult to take a photograph of. That sounds like nonsense, but when you're there, it was difficult to get. I could only get in one end of it. And you can see there, by the way, if you look along the line of the Partry Mountains there, you can see the conical Donaghpatrick pointing up there. This seems a good candidate for an assembly site. Royal sites are associated with fairs and horse racing, both of which are recorded to have been held at Belclare, the village at the northern foot of the hill, by the incumbents of Caherlistrane estate, since at least the reign of James I, but in all likelihood as a continuation of a long existing tradition. Finally, in terms of the monuments, by the western flank of Knockma lies Lough Kinne, today known as Lough Hackett. Lough Hackett has a Crannog stronghold surrounded by ring forts, which was the ancient seat of the kings of Iar-Connacht. You can see there in the middle of it, the Crannog. Now, this royal Crannog is well documented in the medieval records. For example, in the early Irish life of the 7th century saint Mochua of Bala, the saint Mochua journeyed to Lough Kinne, where the king who ruled there asked him to tame the monster infesting the lake. Mochua duly did so and carried on his way northward into Mayo. Other saints of the early Christian period must have applied to the kings of Lough Kinne, judging by their churches that were built in a cluster round about. These include St. Jarlath of Tuam, St. Fursa, St. Brendan, St. Cuana, St. Bene, and St. Patrick, of which more later. Amongst several references in the medieval Irish annals to the royal seat on Lough Kinne is a fascinating record of its destruction in a great storm in the year 990. A great wind swallowed the island of Lough Kinne suddenly in 1 hour, with its habitation and circular wall, which was 30 feet. So it's a kind of a precious glimpse of what a Crannog would have looked like in its own time. One of the most telling characteristics of an important site is access. Are there many roads leading there? From a map made of the ancient roads of Ireland by Colm O'Loughlin, 4 roads lead to Knockma and Tuam, the monastic town in its shadow, that in the 12th century was made a bishopric and then an archbishopric. You can see the 4 roads there. In addition, the royal Crannog at Lough Kinne lies close to Boher described as the oldest road in County Galway, running southward from the ford on the Black River at Shrew down to the Slieve Mountains. So, from the 7th century CE, this territory was called Uí Briúin Shola, whose kings from the 10th century on were the O'Flahertys. But who were the inhabitants of Knockma and its surrounds before the Uí Briúin? The records of these people are curiously scant. Genealogies, topographical and to an extent literary texts retain some memory. In his History of Ireland, the 17th century historian Geoffrey Keating related that the province of the Iar-Connacht, the ancient peoples of Connacht, was partitioned into thirds. The third, which stretched westward from the Galway River in the south to the Duff and Drowse River in the north of the province, was allotted to the people known as Fir Dubhna. I've drawn a line between Galway and where the Drowse River is. So from westward of that line of the Fir Dubhna, according to Keating. It's noticeable that Knockma actually lies on this boundary line. The Fir Dubhna were an ancient people, mainly associated with Leinster and southwest Mayo. However, the place name, Tullach Dubhnan, located at Knockma in saga literature, suggests that the Fir Dubhnan lived there also. Dultach MacFurbishy, a 17th century Sligo historian, recorded in his great book of genealogies that the people who lived around Knockma were the Tua Chuncovarn, or Convernamada, and the Tua Vocnuvor. Another ancient people of Knockma, the Kirka Kern Mada Shul, feature in the Connacht tale The Battle of Lecher Ridda. And MacFurbishy stated that all of these population groups belonged to the Fir Bolg. According to the Book of Invasions, the Fir Bolg were the fourth wave of invaders to Ireland, who briefly ruled before being defeated by the Tuatha Dé Danann, the fifth wave. After that point, the Fir Bolg were largely dispossessed, driven westward into Connacht and reduced to the status of vassal peoples. The royal crannog of Lough Kinmeh was said to have been named after the Fir Bolg prince, Kinmeh Mac Uvor. Approximately 28 kilometres westward, across the plain of rich pasture land, lies Moitura near Con, said to have been the field of the first battle between the Fir Bolg and the Tuatha Dé Danann for the sovereignty of Ireland. This is one of the stone rings in Nymphsfield. So, battlefield or no, Moitura or Nymphsfield, County Mayo as it is now known, is another landscape of ritual significance, with several stone circles and cairns. The annals record several battles fought over possession of the rich plain between the two ritual sites of Moitura and Knockma. The Book of Invasions tells us that the Milesians, or Gaels, drove the Tuatha Dé to live in the burial mounds of Ireland, portals to the other world. Finvara, son of the Tuatha Dé deity known as Dagda, held court at Knockma and features in such mythological tales as Agal of Nishanorach, the colloquy of the old men, and Althrav Chigadol Vada, the fosterage of the house of the two drinking vessels. Later in folklore, Finvara diminished to become king of the fairies of Sheath Mother, in whose otherworld palace human travellers on Knockma could stray. Here he is looking quite cross, looks disappointed and short-changed. Both Sir William Wilde and his wife Francesca, and later Douglas Hyde, published folk tales about Finvara, the fairy king of Knockma. He was believed to seduce human women and to enter the horse racing at the local Castle Hackett Fair as a jockey who won spectacularly every time. When Finvarra and his courtiers won hurling matches or battles against the sheen of other fairy mounds, the harvest in Connacht was always plentiful. Intriguingly, there is a geological rationale for the subterranean chambers of Finvarra's palace. In Polnahollia townland, on the southwestern flank of Knockma, lies an opening to an extensive cave system in the limestone, whose extent has never been established, and which is filled with fine white quartz sand, dating from the tertiary period, which I gather is between 66 million and 2.6 million years ago. So while it's been studied by geologists, Polnahollia has never been the subject of archaeological investigation. It's true, geologists are very, very excited about this, about Polnahollia, because it's a rare occurrence. I will say that quartz, white quartz, was considered sacred in prehistoric times. You get white quartz deposits, like at Newgrange. It shines in moonlight. There are various white quartz paths, prehistoric paths, ritual and pilgrimage paths in Britain and on the continent for the same reason, that it was considered sacred. So the fact that we have this strange cave system which is filled with white quartz sand, I don't know what that means, but I suspect it meant something. The medieval records repeatedly state that the Uí Briúin rulers of Mors Seola were related by blood to the Uí Briúin of Cruachan in County Roscommon. Now, scholarship generally explains this claim as a result of the Uí Briúin having expanded westward from Roscommon and taken possession of Mors Seola. However, I think the evidence of the annals and the earliest texts documenting the travels of St. Patrick in the 5th century contradict this explanation, and that the spread of the Uí Briúin actually flowed the other way, from County Galway to Roscommon. That is, from Knockma in the west to Cruachan in the northeast. And to explore this possible connection, I want now to turn to St. Patrick and his travels in Connacht, as related in the biography written by the late 7th century bishop Iar-Connacht from North County Mayo, and in the tripartite life of St. Patrick. So a passage in Iar-Connacht's text may be summarised thus. Accompanied by certain bishops, Patrick came to a place called Silk, to the halls of the sons of Briúin, and they camped on peaks or summits of Silk, among stones upon which Patrick wrote letters visible even in Iar-Connacht's day, and he established a church on Loch Selka and baptised the sons of Briúin. The Vita Tripartita names the place Mol Selka and Dovla Selka, relating that Patrick's seat is there among the 3 stones on which he inscribed the letters, and he founded a church on Loch Selka, namely Donaghpatrick Mor Selka, in which he baptised the Uí Briúin and blessed them. And Ludwig Bieler, who in 1979 edited Iar-Connacht's text, observed that Iar-Connacht's geographical standpoint was clearly fixed at Selk. Iar-Connacht knew the place and has seen there the stones said to have been inscribed by Patrick. Bieler goes on to say, it is possible that his second book, Iar-Connacht's second book, which is about Patrick in Connacht, was written there at Selk. So this place, Selk, has been located in 2 separate locations. The 19th century scholar, John O'Donovan, identified it as Donaghpatrick near Cruachan in East Connacht, a view that has largely been accepted since. However, his 17th century predecessor, Rory O'Flaherty, scholar and last lord of the O'Flaherty family of West Connacht, located it at Lochkinna, the chronode stronghold of the Uí Briúin kings of Marshola. It is the contention of this talk that O'Flaherty and not O'Donovan was correct in locating Patrick's encounter with the sons of Briúin not at Cruachan, but at Knockma. This is not my theory. This theory was first suggested by the historian Kenneth Nichols and then reiterated by Paul McCotter. It must be remembered that Tyrconnell made no mention of a king of Connacht at Cruachan. By contrast, he related that at Cruachan, Patrick converted the two daughters of Laoire MacNail, the High King of Tara, raising the intriguing possibility that in Patrick's day, Laoire was also over-king of Cruachan. So, what is the evidence for Patrick baptising the sons of Briúin at Knockma rather than Cruachan? Briúin was the 5th century eponymous ancestor of the different branches of the Uí Briúin family of Connacht. The sagas describe him as a brown-haired, powerful and bull-like man with solidity of limb, with the strength of 9, and in either hand endowed with equal weapon skill. Such was Briúin. According to the adventures of the sons of Uí Briúin, Briúin, together with his brothers, Fiachra, Alan and Fergus, were the sons of Uí and his wife, the witch queen, Morfinn. But the tale also relates that Briúin and his brothers had half-brother, the much more famous Níl Níl, 9 of the 9 hostages, son of Uí by a woman named Callum, possibly a British slave. Now, this saga is less concerned with historical reality than with the struggles between the Connacht ruling dynasties, allegedly descended from Briúin, Fiachra and Alan, and the phenomenally more successful family of the Inéal. Briúin's father, Uí, and grandfather, Muradach are included in lists of the kings of Tara, but this seems to be a retrospective relocation of their history by the later Inéal kings of Tara. Another saga, The Adventures of Conall, the son of Níl, tells how Briúin fell in war against his brother Fiachra, ancestor of the Iar-Connacht. The place name cited, Tallaght Dubhnan Dov Clun, suggest that Briúin was killed and buried on Knockma. And interestingly, folklore survives from the 1930s of a fort on the northern slope of Knockma known as Lis na Briúine, where Briúin was said to have fought, died and been buried. In the 19th century, the historian Hubert Knox, in fact, wondered whether the Uí Briúin, rather than sweeping into Knockma and conquering the Firbolg population there, had themselves been the Macúvor branch of the Firbolg at Knockma, who simply rebranded themselves upon the success of their king, Briúin. There is a postscript to the story of Briúin in the Book of Ballymote. His body is said to have been exhumed from its tomb on Knockma by Saint Bio Abe and reburied beside Roscam Monastery, close to Oranmore, at the southernmost end of Marshola. Perhaps the monks of Roscam hoped to benefit from the protection and prestige his relics might provide. Applying the place names for Briúin's fortress in the sagas to St. Patrick, it seems likely that he blessed the sons of Briúin on Knockma, whose peaks seem a better match for the location Selk than the flatter terrain of Uí in Roscommon. Judging by Iar-Connacht, Patrick's itinerary would therefore have taken him from Cruachan west through Uí Briúin to Knockma before turning northward. While O'Donovan chose Uí as the location for Donaghpatrick, where Patrick blessed Briúin's sons, the Book of Uí Briúin includes a topographical poem about Tuam, which says that Shalga is one of the names for the town. Now, simply meaning the mound of the hunt, it is perhaps unsurprising that the place name Donaghpatrick occurs in more than one place. O'Donovan's choice of Uí may have been influenced by his fruitless search around Lough Kimmy for Patrick's inscription on stones there, and his letter expresses his eventual frustration. I made every search for these colossi on the banks of Lough Hackett, which O'Flaherty states to be the modern name for Lough Shalga, but in vain. It was in my power here to impose upon future investigators of antiquities by borrowing a chisel from a stonecutter at Tuam and inscribing the Roman characters of the time of Patrick on the stones. Such things have been done. It's an unusually intemperate comment for O'Donovan to make. Perhaps, however, he was looking in the wrong place. There are two churches at Knockma associated with Patrick. Donaghpatrick beside Lough Kimmy, and another church higher up the hill called Killaur, which includes a small mound by its northeastern corner called Donaghpatrick, St. Patrick's Bed. Folklore gathered in the 1930s describes a well near Killaur which has 3 larger stones and a stone chair called St. Patrick's Seat, much like that described in the tripartite life. So, after more tramping about, this is last summer, consultation with local people brought me to this well, where the stone chair bears a resemblance to the chair now in the Ulster Museum of Clan Uí Briúin, or Clan de Boy of the northern Uí Nail near Belfast. So this is the well, and this is the chair. It doesn't look like much. This is what inaugural chairs look like. This is the one in the Ulster Museum. The back is higher, but it's the same type of thing. Perhaps, significantly, Killaur is overlooked by the great enclosure and possible assembly site of Iar-Connacht. The life of St. Benin, or Benignus in Latin, a disciple of Patrick, provides further place name evidence of Patrick's evangelizing mission to the sons of Briúin and Knockma, concluding with Benin's foundation of his own church at Kilbennan beside Tuam. An important message of Iar-Connacht, writing in the late 7th century, was to castigate those whom he called renegades and warlords who had once supported the kingdom of Patrick but no longer did so, promoting other saints instead. Though he did not name names, it seems likely that he was referring to the Uí Briúin, who in his day were expanding into new territories, threatening Iar-Connacht's own homeland of Tullally, County Mayo, and promoting the rule of St. Brendan. So why is there confusion about where Patrick baptized the sons of Briúin? The historian F.J. Byrne wrote that the Uí Briúin pedigrees show every sign of falsification, and this is true. By comparison with the evidence of the origin of the Uí Briúin and Knockma, there appears to be no evidence for the origin of the Uí Briúin in Uí or elsewhere in County Roscommon. Such evidence that exists suggests that the main population group at Cruachan were the Ciarí, whom Patrick had visited and whom the expanding Uí Briúin eventually succeeded in deposing as the rulers of Uí. It therefore seems likely that the Uí Briúin commissioned a rewrite of their genealogy of the type undertaken by so many early medieval Irish families whose fortunes were on the rise. As the archaeologist Elizabeth Fitzpatrick has shown, it was a common habit of the conquerors of a prehistoric landscape to strengthen authority to rule by claiming possession of the new ancient site. As I mentioned, the traditional assumption has been that the Uí Briúin originated in Roscommon and then spread westward to County Galway. But it is more likely that instead, and over time, the Uí Briúin substituted their erstwhile ancestral home of Knockma in Morshola for that of Cruachan in Uí, which was the most prestigious ritual location of Connacht kings. It's an obvious target to go for. The earliest members of this group are merely called the Uí Briúin. Only later, as they splintered, are they named Uí Briúin Shola, Uí Briúin and Uí Briúin Breffne, who migrated as far northeast as Leitrim and Cavan. But it actually took about 150 years of infighting and warfare before the separation of the branches was fully established. So this is a left to right family tree. Here's Brian up here, and over there is Iar-Connacht. Iar-Connacht, who's considered to be the first Uí Briúin ruler who really consolidated his possession of Connacht. So that's a long time. That is well over 150 years in time. So, for instance, alongside occupation of the apparent home territory of Morshola, a pattern of sustained attempted expansion eastward by the Uí Briúin can be detected in the annals from the 6th century onwards. Thus, in the year 540, King Éed MacEachach Tiermcarna, though subsequently recorded as King of Cruachan, granted Annaghdown to St. Brendan, a gift he could only have made if he had ruled Morshola. Yet the same King Éed is recorded to have been killed by his own people in County Roscommon, perhaps on an eastward campaign. Later on, in 703, King Éed's great-grandson, Caherlistrane, is described as King of Lochkimin. In the second half of the 7th century, the Uí Briúin conquest of Uí appears to have been completed, and the cause for this might have been a really deft political move. According to the text known as the Banhanachas, the Law of Women, Muireadach Mullahán married a woman called Cacht, who was a princess of the Caherlistrane. Now, it has been speculated that the Caherlistrane might have been the previous rulers of Uí before their defeat by the Ciallaigh, so they are the ancient ruling family of Uí. And by marrying into the ancient ruling family of Uí, the Uí Briúin would simultaneously have gained a right to rule Uí and to have severely undermined the Ciallaigh, the current incumbents. So, I will point out, though, that the law tracts don't show any kind of right of inheritance from women, and yet, in the annals, you see time and again political capital made from the fact that an aspiring king points to his mother's lineage. So, either way, the deft political move succeeded. Iar-Connacht, the son of Cacht, and Muireadach Mullahán is judged to have consolidated the Uí Briúin as the dominant dynasty in Connacht. That's the king at the very end of the line there. I want to end on a cautionary note. In 1994, the cairn on Donaghpatrick, a shoulder of Knockma, was completely dug out to make way for a water supply reservoir. On another shoulder of Knockma, there is a quarry, burrowing away into its eastern flank, excavating limestone in the immediate vicinity of Caherlistrane, another subsidiary cairn. In terms of the clash between development and the protection of an ancient complex, we've been here before. 2010 marked the opening of the new M3 motorway, which leads through the world-famous Royal Landscape of Tara, County Meath, seat of the High Kings of Ireland, destroying on its route important monuments integral to that complex. Evanmacha, or Navan Fort, in County Armagh, ancient seat of the Kings of Ulster, was threatened for many years by a limestone quarry excavating close by, before it was protected, furnished with a heritage centre and open to the public. Only last year, 2023, Evanmacha won the Traveller's Choice Award on TripAdvisor based on visitor numbers to the site and heritage centre and on positive visitor feedback. So, such an example can guide us in improving how we curate our history while enriching the local economy. The seemingly contradictory demands of commerce and heritage should be reconcilable. Either way, the royal and ritual landscape of Knockma is in need of greater study and protection than it currently commands. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. That's a fascinating talk. One of the first things I see every morning when I open the curtains is Knockma, and I never forget the same way ever again. So, any questions for Jessica? Don't be shy.
Is that Finnabar Castle idea? That was just the Kermans making up a name.
Yeah.
So there was no castle there.
No, there was a cairn there, and they altered it and castellated it. They put battlements on it. The Curwens liked to foster this idea that Finvara was that old Mr. Curwen used to go up Knockma and talk to Finvara. They like that idea, and in fact there's a book by Caesar Otway in 1839 called A Tour of Connacht, and Caesar Otway came to Castle Hackett in 1839. He looked up, and in his book he says, I looked up and I saw this castellation, and I was thinking, who built a castle on top of Knockma? And it was the adaptation of two of the cairns, from cairns into Knight's Tower and Finvara's castle. And he's absolutely incandescent in his book about it. He says, this is a folly. Can you not be satisfied with what's on top of Knockma instead of changing it into something which is nonsense? It's quite funny, I was only actually reading it last night and thinking, okay, he didn't mind, annoying people.
Jessica, the earthly mound you referred to,
Yeah.
has your survey so far indicated the extent of that, or can you see that here in certain parts, not in others?
Do you mean the earthen banks?
Yes.
Don't know yet. On Saturday we're meeting Paul Masons to have a look at the first look at the LiDAR that he captured by means of drones. I'm kind of waiting with bated breath to see what those earthen banks might be. I mean, they really are under the tree canopy, and that's the problem with any kind of normal aerial survey, which is why we went for LiDAR to see if it could penetrate the tree canopy and the vegetation. Yes, I will. I will. That's the plan.
Anybody else?
Talking at the end there about kind of protecting these sites and things like that, what can individuals and groups do on the ground to protect these places? Because I think a lot of us feel powerless sometimes when we see things being plowed over, and what can we do? What can we?
Sure. I mean, it's a slightly bizarre situation because An Taisce, which is like the heritage, the National Heritage Association, actually took this case of Knockma and the quarrying at Knockma all the way to the Supreme Court. They spent a lot of money on it, and they won an injunction. The Supreme Court judge, this was in 2018, and the Supreme Court judge said, "I'm not inclined to enforce this. It has to be enforced by Galway County Council." The thing that can be done is people speak to their the local councillors. Yeah, that's the thing. It's political pressure. Yeah.
Any more questions? Going once? Nobody?
The LiDAR, what is it? I don't know much about it at all. What is it looking for? What do you expect to be beyond your memories?
Yeah, no, LiDAR, okay. LiDAR is great because it's a kind of it's light ground penetrating radar, which is able to detect, able to catch imagery of archaeology that's been either ploughed out or is covered by vegetation. Not a vast amount of vegetation, but so, for instance, you can't really do much in the way of LiDAR in the Amazon. But, we're not the Amazon. So, in other words, for instance, last year they did LiDAR at Baltinglass in County Wicklow. Baltinglass was always known to be a royal and ritual landscape. What came up was the most extraordinary capture of all of the features of a royal and ritual landscape. Enclosures, cairns, ring forts, barrows, cursuses, these ritual paths up the most difficult side of the hill, up which prehistoric people would have processed to things like to watch, to observe, solar and lunar alignments. All of these are features of royal and ritual sites, which are very often been either ploughed out or obscured. So to be able to get a sense of the whole ritual landscape, LiDAR is probably the best way to do it. Now, it takes a great deal of processing of the data because when you get the data initially, it's like, oh great, it's a bunch of grey blobs. It doesn't look like anything. And it requires a great deal of digital processing. We're going to get a look at the first grade of processing on Saturday, and we'll see, what comes up. I was upset. I mean, you can see it online actually. If you look up Baltinglass Heritage Council. It was the Heritage Council that paid for their LiDAR. And I mean, online on YouTube, you can see the presentation that came out of that, of their findings. And it's absolutely, I mean, I was jaw-dropped looking at it.
Essentially, it means you don't have to excavate, don't you?
It does, exactly so, and that's huge. Because, I mean, you know, excavation of one thing, one monument is okay, that's one thing. But, you know, a whole ritual landscape, you can't excavate that, yeah.
Any more questions? Will you do that? So I should have a few thank yous to do. Firstly, thank you to Moran for the use of the school hall and our equipment. Thank you to Caherlistrane GA for the supply of the chairs and teacups. Thank you to Ronnie Mangan for supplying and setting up the sound system tonight. Thank you to Kevin McNutis for recording the talk. Thank you, of course, to the Heritage Council for funding the LiDAR project. Thank you to Claire and Chrissy for all their work both this afternoon and this evening. Thank you all for coming. And finally, a big thank you to Dr Jessica Cooke for a wonderful talk tonight. Thank you very much.